Family, can I tell you something straight from my heart? There are moments in life when the noise of years drowns out the whisper of God. We spend decades chasing, worrying, building, and sometimes breaking, only to find out that what God was trying to show us was right there the whole time. It took me 50 years to realize what God was showing me in just 30 minutes. Half a lifetime of lessons, scars, victories, and tears, compressed into a divine whisper I almost missed. Have you ever looked back and thought, Lord, you were speaking all along, but I was too distracted to listen? That's where I stood. But here's the beauty. God doesn't waste time, and He doesn't waste pain. What He reveals in a moment has the power to reframe a lifetime. That revelation doesn't just bless you, it sets you free. It gives you courage to walk lighter, love stronger, and live with purpose. So today, I want to share with you 6 truths that God pressed on my heart, truths that may take only minutes to receive, but can transform the rest of your years if you grab hold of them. When I think about the way God moves, I've learned that clarity is not something He just drops into our laps while we're running in 1,000 directions. Clarity is something He gives when we make room for it. You see, most of us are living surrounded by noise from our schedules, noise from our worries, noise from social media, noise from opinions, and sometimes even the noise of our own doubts. We keep asking God, why won't you speak to me? But the truth is, God is speaking. The question is, are we still enough to hear Him? There was a season when I kept begging God for direction. I wanted answers about my purpose, about decisions, about where I was supposed to go next. But every time I prayed, it felt like silence. I thought maybe He wasn't listening. Maybe I was too broken, too imperfect, too far gone. But the reality was, I was too busy. I was asking for His voice while never giving Him my attention. I would pray, then rush off to fix things myself. I would cry out, then drown my own cries with my own solutions. Clarity doesn't come when you're hustling to fix life on your own. Clarity comes when you push pause, when you turn down the volume of everything else and say, God, I'm here, and I won't move until I hear you. That's when His whispers get louder. That's when the confusion clears. That's when the fog lifts, and suddenly what looked impossible yesterday makes sense today. I remember a time when my mind was spinning with 1,000 questions. My life felt like it was standing at a crossroads, and every direction seemed like the wrong one. And for weeks I wrestled, strategized, and stressed. But then one afternoon, I did something different. I turned off my phone, shut the door, and just sat still with God. No agenda, no list, just stillness. And in 30 minutes of silence, I received more direction than I had gathered in months of striving. The Spirit brought scriptures to mind. Conversations I'd had with people started connecting like puzzle pieces, and peace settled into my heart like a weight being lifted. That's when I understood. The clarity I had been begging for was never hidden from me. It was waiting for me to slow down long enough to receive it. Think about Elijah in the cave. He was desperate to hear God, and he looked for Him in the wind, in the earthquake, in the fire. But God wasn't in the noise. God came in the whisper. That whisper is not weak. It's intimate. It means God is so close, so present, that He doesn't need to shout. And yet, if we never quiet ourselves, we'll miss the very voice that's trying to guide us. We live in a world that glorifies speed and noise, but heaven works in stillness and surrender. The enemy will always try to keep your mind noisy, because if he can't destroy you, he'll distract you. And distraction is often more dangerous than destruction, because you'll keep moving, but in the wrong direction. That's why clarity is not about God suddenly deciding to speak. It's about you deciding to listen. When you get still before God, he starts untangling the knots you've been carrying. He shows you that the things you thought were obstacles were actually opportunities. He reveals that the people you thought were enemies may have been instruments to push you closer to him. And the burdens you thought were going to break you suddenly make sense as part of the training he was preparing you for. Clarity is not complicated. It's not some mystical secret reserved for the spiritual elite. It's God saying, "Be still and know that I am God." It's the kind of knowing that doesn't always come with every detail, but it gives you the confidence that you don't have to figure everything out, because the one who holds tomorrow is already guiding your steps today. Delay is one of the hardest things for us to understand when it comes to walking with God. We live in a world of instant answers, fast results, and quick fixes. We can press a button on our phones and have food delivered. We can search online and find any information in seconds. We can drive through and pick up what we want without ever leaving the car. And so, when we pray, when we believe, when we sow, we expect God to move on our timetable. But the truth is, heaven doesn't operate on human schedules. God's timing is not our timing, and delay does not mean denial. I can think back to moments when I was sure God had forgotten me. I prayed for a door to open, and it stayed shut. I asked for a need to be met, and the answer didn't come. I begged for a dream to come alive, and all I got was silence. It felt like delay, and delay felt like rejection. But years later, I realized God wasn't saying no, he was saying not yet. And the difference between no and not yet is everything. No means it's not in his will, but not yet means he's preparing something that requires patience to receive. What I didn't see at the time was that if God had given me what I wanted when I wanted it, it would have crushed me. I wasn't ready for the blessing I was asking for. My character wasn't developed enough. My faith wasn't strong enough. My heart wasn't mature enough to handle the weight of what I was demanding. Delay wasn't punishment. It was protection. Delay was God giving me time to grow into the blessing, so that the blessing wouldn't destroy me. Think about Joseph. At 17, he had a dream that he would lead, that people would bow before him. But that dream didn't come to pass the next day. Instead, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, lied on, and locked in prison. It looked like everything was going backward. It looked like delay meant God had forgotten. But every step of delay was shaping him. Every season of waiting was developing him. By the time Joseph stood in the palace, second in command over Egypt, he wasn't the same boy who bragged about his dream. He was a man shaped by patience, humility, and wisdom. The dream was the same, but Joseph had to be transformed before he could carry it. Delay was not denial, it was preparation. And that's the same truth for us. When God holds back what we are asking for, it's not because he doesn't care. It's because he loves us too much to hand us something that will harm us before it helps us. Some of the greatest blessings require growth before they can be received. Some of the promises God makes require time for our roots to grow deep, so when the fruit finally shows up, it doesn't fall too soon. Delay also teaches us dependence. If God gave us everything instantly, we wouldn't need faith. We wouldn't need prayer. We wouldn't need to seek Him. But when there's a delay, it pushes us to trust. It drives us to lean in. It forces us to believe that His ways are higher than our ways and His thoughts higher than our thoughts. Delay purifies our motives, because in the waiting you have to decide, do I want the gift or do I want the giver? Do I trust God only when He's fast? Or do I trust Him even when He seems slow? Sometimes what feels like delay is actually alignment. God may be arranging people, opportunities, and resources behind the scenes. He may be shifting things in the unseen that you don't know about yet. And if He rushed it, you'd miss the alignment. What looks like a closed door may simply be God timing the moment when everything will line up perfectly. Delay is not God withholding, it's God orchestrating. Your wounds are not just random marks from life's battles. They are the very places where God has written some of His greatest lessons. Every scar tells a story, and every story carries a purpose bigger than the pain you felt in the moment. Too often we look at the broken places in our lives and think they disqualify us. But in reality, they are the very places God uses to shape us, mold us, and prepare us. Your wounds are not wasted, they are training grounds. When you've been hurt, betrayed, abandoned, or overlooked, it's easy to believe that those moments are the end of your story. But in God's hands, the wound becomes the classroom. You learn compassion because you know what it feels like to be crushed. You learn patience because you've endured waiting seasons where nothing made sense. You learn resilience because you've been knocked down and had to crawl back up again. The very pain you thought would destroy you becomes the soil where strength and wisdom grow. Think about David before he ever faced Goliath. He didn't start as a warrior in the spotlight. He started as a shepherd in obscurity, fighting off lions and bears when nobody was watching. Those fights left him with scars, but they also left him with skill. What looked like meaningless struggles were training grounds for the day he would stand before a giant with nothing but a sling and a stone. The wounds from his past battles equipped him for the victory of his future. That's how God works. He takes your wounds and turns them into weapons. Sometimes the people who hurt you are actually instruments of your preparation. Joseph was wounded by the betrayal of his brothers, sold into slavery, and unjustly thrown into prison. Every wound could have made him bitter, but each one made him wiser, stronger, and more dependent on God. And when he finally stood in a position of power, he could look his brothers in the eye and say, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That's the power of a wound that has been surrendered to God. It shifts from being a place of bitterness to becoming a platform for blessing. Your wounds also create empathy. When you've walked through pain, you're able to minister to others in a way that theory never could. Someone who's been broken can look into another person's eyes and say, "I know what that feels like," and mean it. Pain has a way of softening your heart toward people. You don't just preach hope. You embody it. You don't just talk about healing. You carry the evidence of it in your scars. And those scars become proof that survival is possible, that God's grace is real, and that broken people can still walk in victory. Wounds are also God's way of reminding us that His strength is made perfect in weakness. Paul begged for the thorn in his flesh to be taken away, but God said, "My grace is sufficient for you." That wound was not removed because it was part of the training. It kept Paul humble, dependent, and aware that the power of his ministry did not come from his own ability, but from the Spirit of God working through him. Sometimes the wound doesn't go away, but it keeps you anchored to the very one who is holding you together. So many times we try to hide our wounds as if they disqualify us. We cover them up, pretend they never happened, and try to present a polished version of ourselves to the world. But the truth is, the wound is where the testimony is born. It's the crack in the vessel that lets the light shine through. It's the brokenness that makes space for God's glory. Without the wound, you wouldn't have the wisdom. Without the struggle, you wouldn't have the strength. Without the pain, you wouldn't have the power to stand in authority and say, "I've been there, and I know God can bring you through." God's timing is one of the greatest mysteries we wrestle with. Because it rarely matches our own, we want things now, but He works according to eternity, not urgency. What feels late to us is right on schedule with Him. We think we're ready, we think the door should open, we think the breakthrough should happen, but God sees the end from the beginning. He knows the right time, the right place, and the right order. His timing is not designed to frustrate us, but to protect us and align us with His perfect plan. There are moments in life when it looks like God is running behind. We cry out and say, "Lord, why didn't you show up sooner? Why didn't you stop that storm? Why didn't you heal before it got this bad? Why did you wait until it seemed impossible?" But if you look throughout Scripture, you'll notice a pattern. God often shows up at the very moment when hope seems gone, when resources run out, when human strength has reached its limit. He does that not because He's careless, but because He wants us to know the blessing came from Him and not from us. Think about Lazarus. When he was sick, his sisters sent word to Jesus, expecting Him to rush to their aid, but Jesus waited. He didn't show up until Lazarus had been dead 4 days. To them, He was too late. To their eyes, it was over. But when Jesus stood at the tomb and called Lazarus forth, it revealed something greater than healing. It revealed resurrection power. If He had come earlier, they would have known Him as a healer, but by waiting, they saw Him as the resurrection and the life. God's timing may not match ours, but His timing reveals dimensions of Himself we would never see otherwise. There are blessings that only come when the timing is divine. Abraham was promised a son, but years passed, and the promise seemed delayed. In his impatience, he and Sarah tried to fix the situation themselves, and Ishmael was born. But that was not the fulfillment of God's promise. Isaac came at the appointed time, when Abraham was old and Sarah's womb was barren. Why? Because God wanted it clear that the promise was supernatural, not human effort. The timing made the miracle undeniable. We often mistake God's timing as resistance, when in fact it is preparation. The Israelites were promised a land flowing with milk and honey, but they wandered 40 years before stepping into it. Was it because God couldn't deliver them sooner? No, it was because they weren't ready to handle it. Their mindset was still that of slaves when God wanted them to think like free people. Sometimes the delay is not about the destination being ready for you, but about you being ready for the destination. God's timing also protects you from walking through doors that look good but are not good for you. How many times have we looked back at something we desperately wanted in the past and said, "Lord, thank you for not giving me that when I asked." At the moment it felt like rejection, but in hindsight it was protection. His timing is like a shield that guards us from settling for less than what He has ordained. Waiting on God's timing is not passive, it is active. Trust It means living with expectation that even if it hasn't happened yet, it doesn't mean it won't. It means walking each day with faith that God knows exactly where you are and exactly what you need, and when the appointed time comes, nothing and no one will be able to stop it. The same God who controls the rising of the sun and the changing of the seasons is the same God orchestrating seasons of your life. Legacy is not measured by the number of years you live, but by the impact your life leaves behind. Too many people focus on longevity, counting the days, stretching out the years, trying to add more time to the clock. But the truth is, you can live a long time and still not live well. You can exist for decades and leave nothing behind that matters. Legacy is not about duration, it's about donation. What did you pour out? What did you give? What did you plant that will outlast you? When you study the Word, you see that some of the greatest lives were not the longest lives. Jesus lived only 33 years on earth, and yet his legacy changed eternity. His life was short in length, but infinite in impact. It wasn't the number of days that defined him. It was the purpose he fulfilled. The same is true for us. What matters is not how long we're here, but what we do while we're here. The dash between the date you're born and the date you leave this world carries the weight of your legacy. There are people who will never make headlines, never stand on stages, never have their names in history books, but their legacy will be etched in the lives they touched. A mother raising her children with love and faith leaves a legacy. A teacher pouring wisdom into students who grow up to shape the world leaves a legacy. A man who chooses integrity when nobody is watching leaves a legacy. The everyday decisions you make create ripples that move far beyond your lifetime. Legacy is also about faith. Scripture tells us that Abraham believed God, and his faith was credited to him as righteousness. But the power of Abraham's faith did not end with him. His obedience birthed a nation. Generations after him were still walking in the promise God gave because one man chose to trust God. Legacy is not just what you do, it's what you pass on. Your faith can set a foundation for children and grandchildren you may never even meet. Think about the difference between building monuments and planting seeds. A monument may stand tall for a while, but eventually it crumbles. A seed, however, continues to grow, reproduce, and multiply long after you're gone. Legacy is about planting seeds, seeds of faith, seeds of hope, seeds of love, seeds of character. What you plant today may grow into a harvest you never get to see, but others will eat from it and be nourished because you planted faithfully. Legacy also forces us to ask hard questions. Am I living for myself, or am I living for something bigger? Am I so focused on collecting things that I forget to invest in people? Am I spending all my time trying to make a living that I forget to make a difference? Because the truth is, nobody will remember the size of your bank account, but they will remember the size of your heart. They won't recall every possession you had, but they will remember how you made them feel, how you lifted them when they were down, how you pointed them toward God when they were lost. Legacy is not accidental, it is intentional. You have to decide that your life will be more than just your life. You have to choose to live in such a way that when people talk about you after you're gone, they don't just remember what you did, but they remember the God you served. They remember the way you walked in faith, the way you loved without conditions, the way you stood strong when everything around you was shaking. When God shows you something, it's never meant to be a casual moment that passes by like just another thought. Revelation always comes with responsibility. The reason he opens your eyes is not only to inspire you, but to transform you. Too many people shout about what God revealed yet never shift their actions. They celebrate the moment of clarity, but they don't change their decisions. They talk about the vision, but they don't walk in it. Revelation is not complete until it becomes application. When God shows you something, it demands a response. Think about Peter on the water. He saw Jesus walking in the storm, and that revelation of who Jesus was demanded action. Peter didn't just say, "Lord, I see you." He stepped out of the boat. The vision of Christ in the storm moved him to do something that didn't make sense, something that required faith, something that separated him from the crowd who stayed in the boat. That's what revelation does. It pulls you into action. It calls you to trust beyond comfort, to step beyond safety, to obey even when it doesn't line up with logic. God doesn't give revelation for entertainment. He gives it for elevation. When he shows you a truth, it's because he wants you to rise into it. If he shows you a gift inside yourself, it's because he wants you to start using it. If he shows you a relationship is unhealthy, it's because he wants you to walk away from it. If he shows you a door is open, it's because he wants you to step through it. Revelation always asks the question, what will you do with what God just showed you? Revelation also separates talkers from doers. Many people hear the word, many people receive insight, but only a few actually put it into practice. Jesus told the parable about the wise man who built his house on the rock and the foolish man who built on the sand. Both heard the same word, but only one applied it. Revelation is not about hearing something new. It's about building your life on what you heard. The strength of your house depends on whether you respond to revelation or just admire it. Sometimes the response to revelation is costly. It may require you to shift habits you've carried for years. It may force you to let go of people you thought you needed. It may ask you to step into arenas where you feel unqualified. That's why many people celebrate revelation but resist responding. But what we fail to realize is that the blessing is not in the hearing, it's in the doing. The miracle happens after obedience. The breakthrough comes after the step of faith. Look at Moses at the burning bush. God revealed himself and his plan, but Moses had to respond. He had to go back to Egypt, face Pharaoh, and lead the people. Revelation without action would have left Moses standing at a bush, but because he obeyed, he walked into destiny. When God reveals, he expects movement. Revelation also demands consistency. It's not just about responding once in the excitement of the moment. It's about building habits around what God has shown you. If he reveals that prayer is your power, then responding means making prayer your lifestyle. If he reveals that forgiveness is necessary, then responding means walking in forgiveness daily, not just once. If he reveals a calling, then responding means aligning your priorities with that calling, even when it's inconvenient. Every revelation is a seed, and that seed only bears fruit when it's watered with obedience. You can shout about the seed, admire the seed, even carry the seed in your pocket, but unless you plant it and nurture it, it will never produce anything. That's how revelation works. God places truth in your spirit, but it is your response that determines whether it grows into transformation or remains a thought that never takes root.